Okay, so I just wanted to talk about this palette in relationship to observed color in nature and also situations in which you might use um, some of these colors and observe them and how you might start to interpret what you're seeing. So if we start with a primary color like this very basic middle orange, it's pretty easy to determine that you might head toward these oranges here made from the cadmium red and cadmium yellow. Right in there in the middle we've got something, and then maybe over toward the shadows you might see a little bit more of the cadmium red. So all three of these combined you would probably use for that. Now this object with a shadow cast on it, you might then start to look over at the desaturated versions of the oranges with blue and start to pick up on, well, which one of these might I see when I'm looking at the desaturated? And they might not be there, but you want to start thinking about how you would desaturate those colors with the blues to make the shadow colors. So even right here, putting this right here, you can see this half is in shadow, heading toward the bluer end of things. This half is getting light and it's heading toward its local color, or what it is when it has the most sort of regularized light hitting it, right? And then with the tints, you might see just in the highest highlights how they might head toward these, and maybe even some blues in those highlights. Okay, so you're identifying the warmth and the coolness, the darkness and the lightness, the saturation, the desaturation with this particular palette. If I take an orange red here, you're going to see some elements of this for sure as its base, as its sort of local color, right? As its regularized color. But as it shifts in the light, as you see different elements hitting it, you're going to see it heading toward blue in the shadows. Again, a direct mixture between these two to desaturate. You might see some of the alizarin crimson where it's still warm, but it's in shadow, being useful. And so you're going to be interpreting between the blue and the orange for the shadow areas, and for the local colors, you're going to stay more with your saturated oranges. And in the in-between, it will be just very subtle variations between the blue and the orange. Maybe just a hint of blue comes in when you're trying to get this transition, and then maybe a bit more of blue plus alizarin crimson for this transition. And that will give it its full breadth of value and warm and cool, and while not losing its color identity. As far as the blues go, you've got, the blue that is the blue paper, which is going to shift by depending upon the light that's hitting it, warm or cool, like we talked about earlier. And you're going to say, well, it's not quite any of these, but maybe it heads somewhere toward the ultramarine more than the cerulean blue. And so you'll think about interpreting this blue straight away, and then seeing how perhaps if the blue gets hit by shadow on one side versus another, how that might change the way you perceive it. Or you might be seeing a little bit more sort of warmth on the side that's getting light, and so maybe a dab of orange in that blue with some white is what you're going to do for that. So looking for the complexity, perhaps there's even a little bit of alizarin crimson being popped in there with the yellow, the alizarin crimson yellow orange being popped in there, just for something as simple as this blue, the way light hits it, right? So you want to be interpreting again between your oranges and your blues, even for your local color. When you're talking about colors like the brown paper, you're thinking about, this is a desaturated color. Am I seeing relationships here? Yes. Am I seeing relationships to white in some areas? Yes. And so a tint. And also definitely am I heading in some cases toward the alizarin crimson version of orange as opposed to the more brilliant cadmium red yellow. So these are decisions when you're looking at something, and then again, when it gets hit by shadow and it's darker, it may become even more obvious where the relationships are between the two. So hopefully this is just thrilling to you. It is to me. When you get something like this as a brown egg, that it's like, well, what color is that? I don't know. Where does it fall? Well, it's kind of a combination of all of these types of neutrals that we're making, but you want to start to think about where its identity is the most clear for the overall picture. So, maybe this color here that I mixed the cerulean blue with the middle orange toward the orange side and then toward the blue side with some white, and you try that out. And then maybe it needs a little bit of something else, right? So looking at families of color and how it might relate to something in nature. This is, a stone, a rock, and it has its own color identity and very susceptible to shifting in light. But you might look and see, it has a little bit of this ultramarine blue desaturated with my alizarin crimson type orange, or, it might even pick up some of these, ultramarine blue and alizarin yellow combos. Maybe it's a little bit of all of them. Maybe you have to mix some more stuff to find different chromatic grays between these to get the full range that you see here of this particular neutral. Going to be different on the other side, and going to be different when light and shadow hits it. So that's my brief description of some of the interpretations you're going to have about, where do you begin when you're interpreting a color and a neutral. So I hope that's helpful, and we'll